Hey everyone, welcome back to the Hobby Collab tutorial video where today we've got an awesome tutorial ready for you about how to paint red armor for Khorne Berserkers or Khorne aligned Chaos Space Marines. There's also a bit of a weird thing going to happen in this video. I had a bunch of this UV resin and I didn't really know what to do with it. So at one point you'll see me start using some resin to see if I could make some bloodstone gem armor. But that's just a little bonus if you want. If you like this kind of content, we'd appreciate any support you can give. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, so on and so forth. That's it. Let's start the tutorial. See ya.
All right, so we start off with a black primer. I use Rust-Oleum brand, just a standard rattle can spray. The brand doesn't really matter as long as you get a nice smooth coat to start with. Then we're gonna move on to Vallejo Gory Red. This is a pretty dark red, but the main thing is that we're going to be thinning this down to about a glaze consistency, maybe a little bit thicker, but we're gonna be using this for stippling. So if you don't have a stippling brush, these are round brushes. You could also use a little bit of sponge. And basically this technique is just stabbing at the model. As opposed to something like dry brushing where you're dragging across the edges, you're stabbing the model here. Very appropriate for Chaos Space Marines. Try and get this everywhere, including the shadows. Now, as you do this, you're going to notice like there's, it's not leaving much of a mark, right? Like you can still see so much of that black showing through. That's fine. You're going to have to go through a couple of layers with this to start off with. This is after about 3 layers. And if you look closely, you can see the marks. That is on purpose. We want to have some texture for this model. Gives a little bit of character. It's, we're not using an airbrush, so we're not going to be able to achieve very smooth blends anyway. Then we're going to move on to Citadel Mephiston Red, and we're going to be using the same technique. This is a little bit closer to like a medium red, still pretty saturated though. And for placement, what we're going to do is basically we're going to follow the shapes of each individual piece of armor, right? So if you look at the way I'm stabbing the shoulder pads, I'm only focusing on the areas that would hit that would get the most light. And same thing with the legs. I'm following the shape of the legs, right? You see where I put that 2 layers, I think this time, of Mephiston Red. You can still see that gory red in the shadows and on the sides of the legs and on the bottom of the kneecap, right? Because the light would be hitting, as it casts down, would hit those areas first. Now you don't have to be exact. It's a miniature model, so lighting is probably never going to be perfect. But those are just general guidelines. And then we're going to move on to Vallejo Bloody Red. Same technique, but this time in smaller bits here, right? In smaller proportion, excuse me. So the very tips of the head, the very tips of the shoulders, his little bunny ears here. And the way to think about this is if you're treating a gradient, essentially, right? So within the gory red, you put Mephiston Red. Within the Mephiston Red, you put this Bloody Red by Vallejo. With this one, you're going to be doing 2 coats as well. Just try to keep your, try not to overdo it, which should be difficult. It shouldn't be a problem because it's thin down. Then we're going to move on to Citadel Nuln Oil. I'm sure everyone has Nuln Oil, right? If you don't, just use a standard black wash from your preferred brand. Doesn't really matter. I like Nuln Oil because it actually isn't super dark. I've used brands like AK, their black wash is quite dark. So if you use that brand, thin it down. But anyway, you're going to apply this to the entirety of the model. So the key to using shades is to not end your brush stroke on a flat surface. Don't let it pool on a flat surface. Try to end your brush strokes in a shadow area. Once that's dry, we're going to return to that bloody red and we're going to reapply some highlights. So again, stabbing at the top of the shoulder. Now, if you don't have a very small dry brush like I do, round brush like I do, you can just do this with a small standard brush. As you can see here, I'm just applying a very small highlight to the very tops of the shoulder pads there. And I do that with the head and the bunny ears as well. And then we come on to the most fun part, painting trim and all the other bits. So this is Vallejo Model Color Black, and I'm going to paint all the trim, his belt, all the soft armor. So you notice like under his chest plate there, he's got some soft armor. It's also the areas between his legs, under his arms, elbows, and any cables and stuff like that. again, specifics don't matter. I just really like Vallejo Model Color Black because it goes on so smooth and it's, cheaper than Citadel. So that's a good reason to buy it, right? Then we're going to move on to the lenses. Now, this is Vallejo Intermediate Green. And we're going to paint the lens with a small brush here and just base coat the whole lens. Now, you notice here I get a little bit of overbrush onto the black trim there. I fixed that off camera just by returning to that Vallejo Model Color Black and just covering over that little green mark I did. We're keeping things pretty basic today, so nothing fancy with these lenses. We're gonna move on to Vallejo Livery Green. Now, I think this may have gone out of production, so find your equivalent lime green, green with a little bit of yellow in it. And within that intermediate green, you're going to paint a nice stroke of this lime livery green. I really hope they bring this. I hope this paint isn't out of production. I really like this paint. Although I guess there's always an equivalent somewhere, but it's not really the same. So try to be careful with this. And again, if you get this paint onto any areas like the black trim, just return to that Vallejo Model Color Black and clean it up. Finally, we're gonna put a little reflection dot in the corners of the lenses here. I use Vallejo Dead White, but any pure white will do. And all I'm doing is focusing on the corners of each of these lenses, just giving a little dot. And if you screw up with that, return to whatever color is necessary, the livery green or the intermediate green. There we go. Keeping it simple. So then we're gonna move on to Scale Color Petroleum Gray. This is a very dark gray. If you don't have this color, Corvus Black is a good stand-in, though this has a little bit more of a purple color. But basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna highlight his loincloth here by basically covering the whole thing with this color and leaving that Vallejo black in the shadows. You can also use a reference. If you've placed your model directly under a lamp, it'll show you where the light's cast. And if that's not realistic for you to paint under, you can place it directly under a lamp and then take a picture and use that as reference on your phone or whatever. We're also going to use this color to pick out the ridges of his soft armor here and the cables. Do this for, this area of his abdomen, also the backs of his legs. And if you can see them, if you have access to them, the elbows with the soft armor. I also applied to the cables around his mouth, but not every model is going to have that. So this is weird and totally optional. I'm not going to say don't do this, but I'm showing you what I did because I was experimenting and that was fun. All right, so we get a little bit of this UV resin. If you don't know what this is, this cures via UV light or sunlight. And what I do is I grab this Liquitex Pyrrole Red, which is an ink, and I'm just kind of drawing these random lines and splatters through it. I don't know. I thought it was interesting. I had a bunch of UV resin. I didn't really know what to do with it, so I figured I'd just mess around with it. And so it left this kind of, interesting pattern that I don't think I could realistically get by painting freehand. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply this to the shoulder pads and his bunny ears so don't do this. Don't do what I'm doing here. Put it on a piece of cardboard or something that you don't care about and then apply it with a toothpick. Don't do what I did and apply it directly from the bottle. That is a good way to screw your model up and get this everywhere. Now, you can actually strip, you can get rid of this UV resin. It doesn't entirely ruin the model, but you're going to have to strip whatever part of that model. I used LA's Totally Awesome and it did dissolve the UV resin, but we don't want to do that if we can avoid it, right? Anyway, use a toothpick to spread this out. It's quite viscous. It's almost like a glue consistency. And that's what it looks like after you apply it over the entirety of the shoulder pad, avoiding the trim. And now I'm using that Pyrrole Red to create some patterns within that UV resin. And I don't know, it kind of looked like a gem or like, I don't know, I'm calling it bloodstone. Yeah, there it is. I mean, I think it looks all right. It's quite glossy, which I think is a nice contrast. You can also see it on his bunny ears there. I don't know. It's there if you want it. You don't have to do that, but if you want to try something new, there's always that. I also put an additional layer of that UV resin over it just to get that fully gloss finish. Anyway, we're moving on back to some leather. I use MSP Harvest Brown. This is kind of an orangey brown, and what I'm doing is I'm doing a sketchy edge highlight. This is essentially a way to emphasize the shapes of the model without having to do clean edge highlighting. But then we're going to have Vallejo French Mirage Bleu. And so I'm going to paint some of the trim black. I wanted to give people options. So for this model, there's going to be bronze trim and black trim. So this is how I would do a very basic battle damaged black trim. I would just go around the edges and tap the edges, drawing the occasional line to represent scratches and stuff like that. This is how I painted, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the channel Tabletop Titans. This is how I painted their Khorne Berserkers. And I think it looks pretty decent. So I also apply this to the weapon because I want to leave the weapon black. We're doing it very basic here. This is definitely closer to army painting. You're obviously not going to win a competition with this, but it's a good way to, get the models on the table relatively quick, looking relatively nice. Now, I know some of you want Khorne Berserker style armor, so I'm going to use some Retributor Gold to get some of this brassy color. Now, I know you're thinking this is very gold. This looks closer to, this red and gold looks like a 49er scheme, not Khorne scheme. But what we're going to do is we're going to apply a wash soon, and that'll dull it down a bit to get it closer in line with a bronzy color. I guess technically Khorne is brass, isn't it? You can tell I play World Eaters. Anyway, just try to be careful applying this to any of the trim you want to emphasize. So I'm skipping the knees on this Marine because I wanted to show you a couple of different ways. I think something that's maybe underutilized is mixed trims for Chaos Space Marines. I don't know why I said that weird. Chaos Space Marines. We should try it. Let's start a trend. They cobbled their armor together anyway. Was it realistic for them to have all matching parts anyway? Anyway, then I'm going to use Vallejo Metal Color Steel. If you've never used Vallejo Metal Color, I highly recommend it, with a caveat that they are not quite as easy to work with your standard Citadel paints. And what I mean by that is they are very runny when you first pour them out. They maybe have the worst bottles ever. You think Citadel bottles are bad? I've never spilled so much paint as I have with Vallejo Metal Color. And they splatter. They're terrible. Anyway, but it's actually kind of worth it because the paint is amazing. It goes on so smooth, almost always one layer. Looks so good, so easy to work with. Easy to work with once you've let it dry for a couple minutes. Like if you're going to use these paints, I'd put it in on a palette and let it dry for a couple minutes before using it. They also separate really easy. This is maybe not the best endorsement of them. It's good, trust me. All right, now we're going to dull down that brass using Reikland Flesh Shade. I know a lot of people use this for gold recipes, but I find this ends up looking quite brassy. I guess Retributor Gold is kind of brassy anyway. Anyway, apply this in the same manner that we did with the black wash. That is, avoid pooling, try to end your strokes in a crevice or shadow area. And let it dry before touching it again if you feel like you need to apply a second coat. Then we're going to return to an old classic, Citadel Nuln Oil, and we're going to apply this to all the metal bits, silvery metal bits, so the areas that we painted that metal color steel. No real, nothing fancy here. Just apply it and, try not to let it pool, try not to let it hit anywhere else. And then for both of these metallic colors, we're going to return to a neat version of that is undiluted, unmixed. And just pick out a couple areas to emphasize. So on the shoulder pads, I like to do a quick edge highlight around the tops and the sides of the shoulders. And for the bolt gun here, I'm doing the top of that compensator as well as the tip of the magazine. The outward edge of the magazine, as you see here. Just emphasizing and breaking up the monotony of the shaded metal a little bit. And once you're done, that should leave you with this. Here he is, a quickly done Khorne Marine. I think he looks all right. You're not going to win any competitions with it, but it looks decent. No airbrush needed. He has a lot of what's the word? He's not a character, with the battle damaged armor, not super clean. He's got some weird glossy bloodstone. Is it magic? I know Khorne doesn't like magic, but I don't know. That looks kind of magical to me. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. And if you did, I would appreciate any support you can give. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your enemies. And I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye-bye.